Oh, it's still loading? Okay. Still loading. Mike is here. All right, live.
Are you still sharing your screen? But
Oh,
it froze.
okay. I think we're
Okay.
good now.
Okay.
Uh, wait, why does it say private? That's weird.
Private?
Yeah, I'm not sure. No, no, no. I didn't share my screen. I'm good.
Okay.
Wait, it says private right now. Shouldn't it be live? Let me see if I can make it not private.
Okay.
Oh, public. It is public. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
All right. Live. Okay, cool. So today I'm doing a workshop on how to leverage LinkedIn and how to network your way into your dream career. So the reason why this is important is because so I'll just share a little bit of story about how I have personally leveraged LinkedIn and how it's able to help me in 10 years. So I graduated 2011. So in 13 years, well, in 10 years, I was able to essentially 10x my income. When I first graduated from college, I was making $20,000. And then over the course of a lot of personal development, a lot of networking, I was able to increase my income and now be able to buy a house and have be able to propose to my wife and everything. So in this workshop, I'll share with you how to network better, how to find more clarity into your career path, and I'll also be able to share some stories, the journey of transformation and how I was able to do that. Hopefully, you'll find these stories inspiring. And if you have any questions, feel free to post it in the comments below. And let's get right into it. So, 2013, I graduated 2011. So for 2 years, I was lost. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So I worked all these odd jobs, got fired from Village Office Supply. And I was really sad because I didn't know what I wanted to do and I didn't know what I was good at. I just knew that I need to make more money. I was living paycheck to paycheck and I was doing a lot of drinking, a lot of partying and drugs, and I just didn't have a lot of stability. So that it was very, very difficult for me. But I knew that if I was able to like network better and I was able to apply myself, my life would be a lot better. So I worked at this company called SHI where I was making, pretty average income for someone who was like 23 years old at the time. But I knew that I was capable of a lot more. So, growing up poor, like our parents got a divorce because like we didn't have a lot of money growing up. So, when you're poor, like I feel like all you think about is money. So all I thought about was money. I was like, I need to make more money. I need to make more money. I need to like pay my rent. I need to like go on vacations, like because people on Instagram look like they were like traveling the world, right? So I was like, I'll do whatever it takes to make money. And I'm not gonna lie, like there were some times where I did some shady things that I'm not gonna mention because I'm not trying to get arrested, but it was not good. I'll just leave it at that. Not my proudest moments. But so I was making $36,000 a year. Well, even less than that. Well, okay. When I first graduated, I was making like $18,000 a year, which is like minimum wage, pretty a little bit above minimum wage. And then I went to like 24,000 and then eventually 30,000 and 36,000, right? So I was making pretty much average, but not average if you look at people that have a college degree, right? Average for like a normal person who didn't have a college degree, who had a high school diploma. So, anyways, the reason why I'm sharing with you about all these different jobs is because if you feel lost and you're not really sure like what career path is right for you, there's actually no such thing as a bad career path because the ones that you hate the most are the ones that actually you learn the most from, right? So I knew I hated data entry. I knew I was like not good at accounting and like using Excel, which is why Renee here is luckily here because she helps me with a lot of the data entry stuff. So, um, I realized like, hey, anything that involves me just sitting still by a computer and like Excel sheets and a lot of like what I deem boring. It might not be boring for some people, but just understanding what you like is important, right? So pause this video if you're watching it on YouTube and oh, let me just record this. So pause this video if the question that I want you to answer and put a timer for 5 minutes, right? And just write down like what are the activities you enjoy doing and what do you hate doing? So do 5 minutes on what you hate doing, like in terms of all the careers that you've done, and then 5 minutes on what you enjoy doing, right? So if I was to go through that exercise right now, I would say I hate like accounting, I hate bookkeeping, I hate data entry, Excel macros, like anything that involves like looking at data and analyzing it or anything that's repetitive, I don't like. But what I do enjoy is like meeting people, running workshops, speaking in front of an audience on stage, helping students, helping mentor, helping immigrants like my get familiar with the US and helping them interview and career and doing these types of things, right? So write down what you hate and what you don't like. So after you're done with that 10 minutes, turn back on the video. And the next thing I want you to do. So all right, so I wanted to go back and share like this is the most so I've coached 150 people in my lifetime around career transitions, like my average client getting usually around $37,000 to $38,000 increase in salary. And the one thing I noticed the most that everyone struggles with is like just confidence. Like maybe they only have an associate's degree. They don't have a bachelor's. Like maybe they didn't go to a good university or good college, right? So pause and write down for 2.5 minutes all of your excuses, like all of the things that you don't think you're good enough, right? So we all have different versions of that. So for me, doing this exercise, it would be I'm not tall, right? I'm not particularly like good looking. I would say I'm like I'm above average, right? But I wouldn't say I'm like Brad Pitt or anything like that. Um, I'm, I didn't have parents that have like a college degree. Um, and I'm not particularly like athletic. Like when I've been in sales my whole life, and a lot of these like really good salespeople are like really good looking. They're 6'3", 6'2". They get all the women and like they smile and then like women just faint at their feet, right? Like that's just, so write down all of your excuses why you're not good enough, and it's a cathartic exercise. So after I kind of like write all of my excuses, it's like, oh, like I went to Rutgers, which is like a pretty average school. I almost failed out of college. I didn't do well in high school. I was ranked, I think, 125 out of 430 students, which is like still decent, right? But definitely not like a top performer. Um, so once you write down all of your excuses, um, so and the reason why I want you guys to do this, right, is because when you dream bigger, like for me, I always wanted to work at LinkedIn because I looked up online and I saw on Glassdoor, which is people who don't know what Glassdoor is, it's a website that tells you the salaries and the average reviews for all the companies. So you could look up like Google and Facebook and Salesforce and all these comment, and then you see like, oh, they won all these awards, best company to work for, right? And being Asian, of course, I want to work at one of these good companies because that's what we do. We're high achievers, right? So I I looked at LinkedIn and I saw that they won best company to work for 10 years in a row the last 10 years. And I was like, no way I would get in there. I looked at people at LinkedIn's profiles and I saw that they went to Harvard, they went to Stanford, they have like three masters and whatever, like number one debate champion, or like, they're like jiu-jitsu like champion of Brazil. Like, that's just like the type of people that work at LinkedIn. So once I like got my pity party and I was like, so when I applied to LinkedIn, I didn't get it and I was crying. Like I was like really sad because I was like, oh man, like this is my ticket out to success. Like I'm I'm going to make a lot more money. I'm going to be happy because like money equals happiness, right? That's what they teach us. And I didn't get it and I was like devastated. I was like, you know what? Like maybe it's not meant to be. Like maybe I need to be better. I need to get better. I didn't have a lot of confidence. The second time I applied to LinkedIn, so this someone reached out to me on LinkedIn because I guess I had like around 2,000 LinkedIn connections at the time. And I was like, yes, like I guess I'm good enough for someone to believe that I might be potentially good enough to work at this amazing company called LinkedIn, where at the time they had like 5,000 reviews and it was like 4.5 star average, which is like amazing. And then the companies I was working at had like a 3.2 average, like a lot of like bad reviews. I'm not going to name any companies, but let's just say that it wasn't as highly coveted as LinkedIn. So the second time I interviewed, I was like, I bombed it. Like I was so desperate. Like it was like I was reeking desperation. Like they were literally like, why do you want to work at LinkedIn? I was like, because my life depends on it, like, and you can argue like that's true. That was my truth, right? But it was just desperate. Like I was reeking of desperation, similar to like when you date a girl, like you don't want to be super desperate, right? You don't want to like come off like, oh, I need you, you want to play it cool. Like, unfortunately, that's just how it is, right? Similar to when you're on the job hunt, like you never want to be desperate. You don't want them to feel, you want to deep down inside at your core, you want to know that you're one worthy enough that you're capable of doing this job, and two, you don't want to make it seem like this is the only job that you have. Like, once you kind of master the game, you realize that like, oh, like you should also interview at Salesforce, you should also interview at Google. And then once you have multiple offers, then you have leverage, right? But we'll get into that later on in this. So I'm sharing with you all of this because like I wasn't always a master interviewer. Like I was horrible at interviewing. I applied for 100 different jobs, and this is so cringe worthy, but I remember interviewing for a job and they're like, hey, like, who are your role models? And I said, oh, Yao Ming and Ichiro Suzuki, which for people who don't know, they're like famous athletes in Asia. Yao Ming was like the first Chinese player before Jeremy Lin who like basically he was like the first Asian player that made it in the NBA. And Ichiro Suzuki is like this Hall of Famer who made it into the Major League Baseball. And they're both like iconic in terms of, there's obviously not a lot of Asians in American sports. Even though now there's a little bit more representation, there's still not a lot. And the hiring manager was like, Davidson, like, well, why do you like them? Like, and I was just like, I had no answer. Like I was like so scared. So I said, "Oh, because they're Asian." And then he was expecting me to give like context, like something that's more inspiring like than they're Asian, right? But I just so nervous that I was like shaking. But anyways, like now looking back at it, I should have like been a little bit more thoughtful. I should have planned out, like I should have prepared better, right? So now that I know, I can prepare and say, oh, well, the reason why, because Yao Ming is a trend, like he was the person that paved the way for international basketball, and now, that's common, but back in the 2000s, that was uncommon. So he was an inspiring role model for me because not only did he have a lot of compassion, but he raised a lot of money for charity. He helped build the villages at home, and he was an ambassador. And, I would like to think of myself as an ambassador as well. And why Ichiro Suzuki, because of his work ethic, he never gave up. He was motivating. He was multifaceted. Like not only was he um one of the oldest players, but he always gave 110%, and that really inspired me. Right. So now that if I prepared for that, like most interviews, like they're gonna ask you like, hey, who are your role models? There's some version of that, right? Like who do you look up to? You know, so just preparation is really important. So I'm sharing with you all this because I just, yes, like I've in my lifetime I've had over 40 job offers, right? But I interviewed at over 500 different companies, right? And I bombed like 400 of them. So I just wanted to let you know that this is a skill that you can get better at if you work on it. And it's important because once you master the art of interviewing, you can literally work anywhere, right? Like I've been very fortunate that because I network my way. I could work at Google, I could work at Facebook, I could work at Salesforce. Like, I'm not saying that to be bragging, but I'm just showing you that once you network and you build strong relationships with people and you help people, they're definitely going to help you back, right? Because everyone who reaches out to me knows that I'm going to help them. So it's one of those things that the more people you help, the more they're going to want to help you back. So the the reason why so many people fail interviewing is because they're paralyzed by how many opportunities, how many jobs there are out there. Like, how do you know what's a good job for me? How do I know if I'm gonna suck at this job? What if I leave my job and this new job sucks more, right? Like, it's kind of like being in an abusive relationship. Like, some people stay in relationships because they're afraid. They're like, well, what if no one loves me and like I end up marrying someone who like abuses me even more or hates, or so that might be a horrible analogy, but I think a lot of people I've talked to over 200 people about their careers, and I noticed that the number one thing that why people don't leave their job is because they're comfortable. They're like, hey, like it pays okay, like I'm able, I have a house, like I have kids, I have a mortgage, like I can't be taking risk, right? But I asked them like, are you actually happy, in your job? And most of the time people say no. So if you're not happy or if you feel like you're capable of so much more, but you're not really sure what the next job is, by the end of this workshop, you'll be able to get a better understanding through a few exercises. And I'll share with you about my journey and how I'm not gonna lie, I made some poor decisions that were jobs that ended up not being good decisions. But on the flip side, I've taken a lot of chances and have met a lot of amazing people and have had no regrets because I've taken over 30 different jobs in my lifetime. So I'll just share with you a little bit more about that. So back to being good at interviewing. Being good at interviewing is the most valuable skill that I would argue is probably the most valuable skill ever, right? Whether it's like in like how can I present myself in a way where this girl will like me or this girl will marry me or I meet the in-laws, my girlfriend's parents, and I leave a good first impression, right? And the way you do that is I'll go through the steps. I'll call it the hero's journey, right? So then the next journey, going back to LinkedIn, because I do think storytelling is always like an easier way to share some of these methodologies. The third time I got into LinkedIn is because I was genuine and I reached out to all the Asian people who worked at LinkedIn, and we had commonality. So either they went to Rutgers University, which is the school I went to, or I just saw that in their profile they had something similar, like maybe they like Oprah, and I would like message and be like, hey, I'm also a huge Oprah fan, like, so I would start. I think most people are afraid to reach out to random strangers because they're like, well, why would this stranger like get back to me? But I did it from a place of like genuine curiosity where I was like, hey, like I aspire to be like you one day, would you, and you never want to say, would you mentor me? Because that implies like that's like a big commitment for someone, and people will be scared when you're like, hey, can you mentor me? But instead, you want to make it easy, right? You'll notice a common trend here is like you want to reduce friction for everything that you do. So to reduce friction, you just you just say like, let's say this person is like really into Brene Brown, they're into Tony Robbins, they're into Ram Dass, right? You could send a message and be like, hey, like what a coincidence. Like I'm also really into Ram Dass. Like I love Tony Robbins. He's such an inspirational figure. And I love Brene Brown, like Brene Brown, like some of her videos has really touched my heart because it's a genuine connection and it shows that, oh, okay, this person spent at least 5 minutes looking at my profile. Just having that personal touch will help you get a better response rate. So, anyways, back to LinkedIn. And the reason why I mentioned LinkedIn uh is because it's a very useful tool if and people are getting spammed with a lot of stuff now, right? Especially now more than ever, you have to personalize because there are a lot of AI, there's a lot of automation, so people are getting hit up like left and right. I've only been an entrepreneur for like this is my seventh week and I've getting like 2,000 messages. And so it's ridiculous, right? So you want to personalize and you want to like mention something very specific in their profile. So after I reached out to like 86 people, like seven people got back to me. And you might argue like, dude, that's a horrible response rate. Like that's worse than failing. That's like a F minus, like, you know, but if I didn't reach out, I wouldn't have gotten the job at LinkedIn, right? So it's like, yeah, like it might hurt that you might not get a lot of responses, but at the end of the day, are you going to grow up regretting that, oh, I never took that chance. I never like, went for my dreams. Like I just stayed complacent and I stayed average. Nothing wrong with being average, but we all know that we're capable of a lot more. So I finally got into LinkedIn. Garrett, who's one of my closest friends now, said, "Hey, Davidson, I know like you love LinkedIn. Like, there's an opening for the LinkedIn Learning. Would you be open to interviewing? I could submit your resume." And it was scary, honestly, because I was doing really, really well at my previous company called TriNet, where I had amazing manager, where a lot of his employees, like on his team, like we would cry together. We would, we were amazing. Like a lot of the people on my team, some people were making like 10 times like what the average person is making, right? Which is like an incredible amount of money. So I left something that was actually I was in a really, really good place. Um I was one of the top rookies of the year. I was up on stage. They were all clapping for me. Like I built really, really genuine, authentic relationships. And I really like honestly loved my coworkers. Like, people that I still hang out with today and they come to my birthdays, like I go to their birthdays, like I get invited to their wedding. We become very close. But I knew that at the end of the tunnel, like I knew I wanted to work at LinkedIn because I wanted to be able to work at a company where people like myself who didn't grow up without a father, didn't really have a lot of mentors, can reach out to literally random people in another country and be able to I mean even like Renee, like we met because someone reached out to me, this girl named Ringa who works at her company reached out to me on LinkedIn, right? So it's like it's just a very beautiful platform. So I want you to pause this video and reflect for 5 minutes using a stopwatch, like a timer. Like, what is your dream company? Like, don't hold back. Like, don't think, oh, I would never work there. Like, even if it's Google, even if it's Meta, even if it's Twitter, right? Like, or Tesla, like, don't be afraid to dream big, right? Because honestly, when I was 21 years old, I would never thought I would work at LinkedIn. I had no confidence. I sucked at life. Like I was just good at like partying and drinking and like that was it pretty much. So think about your dream company, write down, make a list of 10 companies that you really want to work at and post some of these in the comments below. And this might take you 10 minutes. Actually, let's do 10 minutes, right? Because you want to be thoughtful. And then you want to write one sentence like why you want to work there, right? So let's say, my first company is Glassdoor. It's like Glassdoor allows people to have transparency so that they can read up reviews on where they want to work, right? So I like the transparency. I like how much value I'm adding to the world. Let's say you want to work at Salesforce. It's like, oh, Salesforce has a world-class training development. They have a lot of diversity. They donate to a lot of homeless with their profits. And Mark Benioff is a very inspiring leader, right? So you want to write down all of like your reasons for those 10 companies when you post below, and just having it in writing will help you be able to manifest it because a lot of humans, we do a lot of things in our heads, but we don't often put it in writing. But once we put it in writing, it becomes a lot more real, right? So okay, so unpause this video. Um, So this is called the plan, right? So the step before is called the epiphany. So the epiphany is when you realize like there's like a breaking moment, right? In my case, I was like overweight. didn't have a lot of money. I kept borrowing money from my friends, and I realized like if I don't change, like my life is gonna go to shit. So when you have like two people, there's two ways to have epiphanies. You're so broke, and then you kind of have to because, or else like you're gonna fail and you can't buy food. Or the other epiphany is like you're inspired by someone else. Maybe you met someone, maybe it's like your high school friend, and all of a sudden he like is able to, get into his dream college or whatever it is, right? He got into his PhD program, and you're like, oh, like I always wanted to get a PhD in psychology. Like, what is that like, right? So there's two ways. Hopefully, you just be inspired, but unfortunately, most people they hit that epiphany when they're rock bottom. So the next step is called the plan, the path forward, right? So how do you create a plan? Like, how do you even know where to start? Like, there's so many companies out there. Well, luckily, there's something called the internet, and the internet is like a very powerful tool, right? Let's say you're like, hey Google, how do I want to make how do I make six figures, right? Like in the US, six figures is like a decent salary where like you can travel, you can go on vacation, like you'll live comfortably, right? So that's what I did. I went on Google and I was like, hey, what jobs pay like really well? And then without a master's or without like a doctorates, right? And then on top of that was like sales, and I was like, huh. So I went on Reddit and I read up. I probably spent like 1,000 hours reading up like all the different types of sales. I was like pharmaceutical sales, where you get to help doctors, and there's like med devices where you help people with robotic surgeries. There's like so many different type of sales, right? I think people are afraid, like being resourceful is probably the number two most valuable skills other than interviewing, because once you're resourceful, you can just go on ChatGPT, you can go on um and let me just show you how to use ChatGPT, because like I think like once you get used to everything is scary initially, right? But once you get used to it, it's like a lot easier. So let me share my screen. ChatGPT. Okay, cool. So let's just say I'm broke and I don't have money and I don't have a master's degree. What jobs out there can I make above average salary without working a crazy amount of hours? You can see my screen, right? Okay. All right. So you can use Google, you can use ChatGPT. There's a lot of resources out there, right? There's Reddit that has like thousands and thousands of articles. So once you get better at being resourceful, it'll help you because you won't be paralyzed. Like you'll be able to think more creatively and think on your feet. So yeah, ChatGPT is thinking, but Google is also like just as valuable, right? The key is to not be paralyzed and to take action. Once we take action, we're able to move to a new possibility, like a new world, versus if we stay stuck in. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like there's been times where I have been paralyzed when I was younger. I was like, I don't know what to do, right? And then you meet a lot of people and then you just ask them questions. When I met like project managers, when I met product managers, I'd be like, hey, like what is your job like? Like, what do you do exactly? You know? So every company I worked at, I would just ask questions like, hey, you're email marketing person, like what does that mean? And then I would just sit next to them and just watch them do stuff, you know? Um, or another way is to there's a lot of resources online, like the public libraries have a lot of like job fairs and help you be able to work on your resume and things like this. This is a tip for you. I think so many of us get paralyzed by our resume. It's like, oh, I have to have the best resume. But actually, the resume doesn't matter as much as you think. It's more about relationships, right? It's like reconnecting with people you went to university with, like talking to like literally random people, like maybe your mom's. parents, like you know what I mean, or your cousins, like you just want to put yourself out there. So here you go. So this is showing that obviously IT. Oh, so another advice is you want to do things that are trending as well, right? Like if let's say back then the people that photocopied paper, like that used to be maybe like 100 years ago, that was like a very valuable skill, but now that's not as valuable. So once you look at what's trending, you know that okay, my these skills are going to be useful for me later on in life, like when I'm older, versus um, stuff that was popular like 20 years ago. What is going on right now? Well, anyways, I'm just showing you how to be resourceful. Hopefully that's helpful. So that's called the plan. So look, at the end of the day, like we all go through struggles, like we all have like whether it's a close one passed away or our parents aren't in our lives anymore, like we all go through like a lot of turmoil. And I'm not gonna lie, like there was like even like a year ago, I was in between jobs because I got let go, like my whole department got let go at Fortune magazine. And it was really hard. Like I was interviewing for roles that was making really, really, really good money, like 7 times the average salary in the US. And I didn't get it and I kept failing, right? So you'll never truly master it. Like there's always gonna be a part where you feel like, man, like I'm like banging my head against the like wall. I feel like there's like nothing going, like I feel like I'm failing and this sucks, right? So when that happens, what I want you guys to do is to first like stop applying to a billion different jobs, right? So first take some time because I think when we're surviving, like if we're stressed out, we're just gonna like apply to random jobs that we don't actually care about and ends up wasting like 50 hours of your time. And I've been guilty of that too. Like I would apply because I'm like, oh my God, I need a job. Like, how am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to pay my mortgage? But you want to be just pause and take some time to process your emotions. Like if you get laid off from a job, if you're failing and you're like not getting like job offers, it's like, okay, slow down. What could I do to improve? Like because I was reading the Reddit sales forums and there was a lot of people complaining about like, oh, this interviewer sucked. Like they made me do a presentation and they didn't even listen to me. And it's like, yeah, you can blame all the interviewers all you want, but at the end of the day, like if you don't take a look at why you didn't get the job, then you're just gonna waste another 100 hours of your time, right? I mean, I was guilty of this. Like I would be like, that person's racist, or oh, only want to hire white people, like, oh, that person, whatever it is. Like I can make every excuse in the book, right? But at the end of the day, once I finally took responsibility, like, oh, maybe I was the one that wasn't good at interviewing. And then once I finally understood that, oh, my interviewing skills could be a lot better, then I was able to like finally get better at this skill. But I had to like realize that first instead of making excuses. So right now, pause this video, write down 3.5 minutes of your excuses of why you didn't get that job, that dream job you wanted, right? Is it because you didn't have the degrees? Is it because you didn't grow up with wealthy parents? Was it because like I'm a female, whatever it is, right? Like, yeah, like we can blame others. I can blame others like, oh, like, all the managers are white or oh, all the managers went to Harvard, right? I can make all the excuses I want, but at the end of the day, like that's not really going to give me any power and that's not really going to help me move on and actually get my job. So write down all of the excuses. Um, so yep, unpause. So the next part that is important is so once you realize like what it is like in the hero's journey, right? We all go through like this like aha moment. You can call it like the epiphany. And I once I realized like what so this exercise is called the unfair advantage. Like you have to figure out like what makes you like uniquely positioned that makes you better, that makes, what's the one thing that you're really, really good at and it doesn't feel like work? And this is probably like the hardest thing to figure out because we sometimes it's hard for us to see it because we're so good at it, but everyone else. So this is where you go up to like 10 of your closest people, it could be your mom, your brother, your coworkers, right? And you just ask them like, "Hey, what am I good at?" You know? And you'll be surprised like some people because we're so good at it, we don't think we're good at it, but everyone else sees it because like it's like the one thing that you do that they're like, "Man, I wish I was really good at this." Like Renee is like really good at like research, right? So once you figure that out. So this is like a weird and sometimes uncomfortable exercise for a lot of people, but it will give you a lot of insights because it's like a blind spot, right? Like I met with my coach Ian, who's this guy who makes millions and millions of dollars, and he was like, Davidson, what you're really good at is like taking action. And I'm just like, oh yeah, I guess so. Because for me, like I'm just that's just how I am. Like you can argue that I'm impulsive because I just take action. I don't really think, I just like do things, right? But for a lot of people, that's like the hardest thing for them, like to take action to start a YouTube channel, start a podcast, apply to 100 different jobs. Like people get paralyzed, right? So pause this. Well, first, all right, this is a 10-minute exercise. Write down 10 people who like you're the closest to, right? So for me, if I would call Zach, Edwin, Adam, Gabby, my two sisters, right? Pick up the phone and just call them and be like, hey, I'm doing this exercise because I just really want to find out like what I'm really good at, and this will help me figure out like what my career path is. So once you call them, write down all of the things that you're good at, and you'll find out like something that might surprise you. So I did this exercise back in 2018, like right before I worked at LinkedIn, and people were like, "You're really good at networking. You're good at making people feel comfortable. You're good at talking to random ass people. You're you're really friendly. You have positive energy. Like so people feel comfortable around you and like you make people smile. And then you you have a big heart, like you're very open, like you're very honest, like you make people feel like they let their guard down, like they don't feel judged or anything like that, right? So I did that and I was like shocked. I was like, holy shit, this makes me sound like I'm like such a cool, awesome person. Like I would hang out with that guy, you know? But prior to me doing this exercise, like my my narrative or my self-talk was like, I'm disorganized. I'm not good at I'm not good at numbers. I suck at accounting. I suck at attention to detail. I I'm a horrible son. I'm a horrible boyfriend at the time. I'm all over the place. I'm disorganized. I have ADHD and I just suck at life. Like that was literally like my self-talk, right? So we all have our versions of that. So write that. So pause the video for 3 minutes and write down like just complain. Now's your time to complain about all the things you suck at, right? Like write it down, get it all out there because like you're thinking it anyway subconsciously, so why not actually write it down, right? And once you write it down and we look at it, the next exercise is this admissible in the court of law? Like if you were in front of a judge, is this like can I go to jail for this, right? So let's go back to my list. I'm a shitty boyfriend. Okay. Actually, in the court of law, probably not. Like I tried my best. Like I tried, taking my girlfriend out. I pay for, I pay for meals. I give her like a massage when she's tired. Like I'm not that shitty. Maybe I'm like a above average boyfriend, right? But I'm not shitty. Okay, next one. Disorganized. It's like there's a lot of evidence like you can argue that I am disorganized, but if it's something I really care about, like if it comes to personal development, if it comes to like setting my goals, like my achievements, and it comes to like actually stuff I actually give a shit about, like actually I'm very organized. Like I planned out my next 5 years of my life because I'm that organized because I care about, impact, right? So anyways, you go back and you do this exercise and would you find out that all of this is actually bullshit. Like you actually, it's not true. You just think it's true because we're like our own worst critic. We're always really hard on ourselves, right? So once you do this exercise, it'll help you be able to find out that actually, um, I'm being really hard on myself and I'm actually, and then because you're asking a lot of your close friends, the people who see you, you'll realize like, oh, I'm actually like pretty good at these things. So your confidence will increase. And once your confidence increases, you'll be able to have a higher probability of getting the job you want because your new story, your new narrative is like, I'm actually really good at research, or I'm really good at data, or I'm good at reading books, or I'm like very thoughtful, or I'm like really nice person, or I'm, have a beautiful soul, like whatever people tell you, right? And the key is to like not try to do this by yourself because we are the worst person to actually see ourselves because we're in our lives 24/7. But other people, they're able to see it because like they're able to have perspective. Whereas like because we're in our own story, all we see is like we suck, right? Because it could be your parents, it could be because you got fired, whatever it is, right? But you want to make sure you ask other people because other people are able to see things that might be a blind spot to us. So, um, so all right, now the next part is called the achievement. And the achievement is this is where you write down, this is how to help you build your confidence, right? Because before we have to love ourselves, we have to actually be able to see real like write down, and this is probably the most uncomfortable exercise for most people because it's so easy for us to tell everyone else where we all failed, but it's actually hard for us to like talk about why we're the best, why we're like number one, why we're like amazing, right? It's just like an uncomfortable exercise. So this my mentor William Lee calls it like the good shit list. So at the end of every day, you want to write down like what did you achieve today? So Tony Robbins also asked this question to himself. So it's like, what impact did I make today? How do I make someone's life better? And what can I do today? What's one thing I could do next tomorrow to make it to move forward in the direction I would like, right? So how did I impact someone's life today? It could be, hey, I made this video, and even if only 5 people watch it, like they'll be inspired or they'll learn something new and they'll love themselves more. The next one is, um, what are you proud of today as well? So you want to do this at the end of the day. So it's like, oh, I was proud of um putting myself first, and I went to like the chiropractor, I went to stretch lab, and like I was able to put myself and work on my self-care, right? I'm proud that it was hard for me to put myself first because I'm a giver, like I want to help people, and sometimes it's hard for me to like prioritize my health first, right? So, and then the next portion is what can I do one thing I could do that will make my life better tomorrow, right? So let's say I like procrastinated and I did not record my videos for my course, right? This course that I want to impact 100 million lives. I can be like, well, literally schedule, block off my calendar, turn off my phone during those things, and then make sure my phone is charged and make sure my microphone is charged as well. And that will so and then schedule it in my calendar, right? So and the reason why, because humans, we all want to grow, like we're like every human being wants to get better every day, right? Whether it's like being better at yoga, like being more flexible through yoga or reading a book so I can learn something new. We all want to get better. So as humans, if we don't have like a concrete goal, we'll feel dead inside. We all have to have goals. Like that's like a human desire. Like even people who don't seem like they have goals, like they have goals. They just are too afraid to tell people sometimes. And lastly, the last step is called transformation, right? What was the transformation that you experienced? So I guarantee you, if you went through all these exercises, you're able to figure out what your excuses are, figure out what you're good at, figure out is this true? Is this admissible in the court of law? Like, am I gonna go to jail? And you'll find out that a lot of these excuses are because of something that happened in our past. So once we figure out, like in my case, the reason why I was bombing interviews is because my guidance counselor in college was like, Davidson, you're not gonna get into med school, like, or dental school, like just quit, like just change your major, like you're not getting in, like you should just stop wasting your time, right? And then I got held back in second grade because I went to like an all Chinese school, and I went from public school to private school, so I had to repeat like second grade, which is so embarrassing. Like who repeats like second grade? Like it's like ABCs, you know what I mean? Like that's so embarrassing. And then the third point is when I was younger, um, I was like I was like trying to get attention because like my dad was working so much. So um I would be like the class clown and be funny in front of like the classes, just, even though I knew the answer, I would just be like try to be stupid and just make jokes. And the teacher would be like, Davidson, like, you're so stupid. But really, I was just trying to make the class laugh, because I wanted that attention. So because of those three moments, that's why I kept bombing all these interviews. And if you want to figure out what your three moments are, right? Well, first you can reach out to me and we can do a coaching session so I can help you find out what it is. But I'll go through the exercise now because once we figure out like our three moments, it'll help us figure out so much, right? Because the reason why we self-sabotage, the reason why we say we're not good enough to get into LinkedIn or Google or like Harvard or whatever your goal is because there's people, whether it's your parents, your older sibling, there's people that have said something. Like I'll never forget all the people like Tommy, who's one of my mentors, he's like a multi-millionaire now. I hung out with him this weekend. And I remember he's like, Dave, saying, like, you need to get your shit together, bro. Like, you're owing me money. Like, you're playing video games all day. Like, you need to, like, you're an adult. Like, you're not a kid anymore. But sometimes we need that reality check. Sometimes we need someone to, like, smack us in the face and be like, yo, wake up, dude. You know? But once we figure out our three defining moments, then it won't control our lives because the reason why I didn't get a lot of jobs and why I bombed those like 400 interviews and I didn't get those offers is because it just every time I failed an interview, it reminded me of when the teacher was like, see, Davidson, like, why are you not applying yourself? Like, why are you failing? Why are you on academic probation? Like, why are you about to get kicked out of Rutgers? And it just made me feel like a loser. So every time I didn't get the job, I would be like, oh, there I am about to fail out of college again, but I'm doing it as an adult, right? So we don't realize that our childhood and our teenage years is impacting our lives. Even as a 36-year-old now, every time I fail, right? Like I'm like, oh man, of course I did. Yeah, because I suck at school, right? Like it's like all these different stories that we have. So that's why coaching is very valuable because once I figure out what my moments are, every time I fail, quote unquote fail anything, I'm like, oh, okay, I have awareness. I know that, okay, this podcast didn't do well because I didn't prepare, like I didn't write a good description, or I didn't make this interesting enough for someone to want to click on my podcast, right? Versus me being like, oh, like I guess I'm just not good at podcasting. I guess I'll try something else. It's like the same thing happened, but one is me taking responsibility for it, and one is like me making excuses like, oh, I just suck at this thing called podcasting. So I know this is a pretty long workshop. I hope you guys got a lot of value from it. So just the like bottom line it, and I'll put this in the show notes. You want to networking is really important because it helps you be able to get a lot more opportunities, especially if you don't come from like a well-off family or you didn't grow up with a lot of money. Two is persistence, right? You want to like put yourself out there. And even if those 67 people never got back to me, but those seven people that did, one of them ended up becoming one of my best friends, and he's mentored me a lot and he's still one of my closest friends, right? So you just think what is the positive that can come from this instead of focusing too much on the negative aspect of things. Um, Three, figure out what your unfair advantage is, which means like figure out what makes you truly unique. And that takes time, but if you ask enough people, you'll be able to figure it out. And then number four, what are the three moments that has made me lose my confidence? And once you figure that out, hopefully my stories helped. I think an easy way to think about it is like what were the three most like if you to go back, something that happened when you were a child, something that happened when you were an adult, and something that happened when you were a teenager. So second grade was when I was like a little kid. Um, when I was a teenager was like when the school teacher was like, Davidson, like you're not applying yourself, like, like you need to like you might have ADHD, like you should go see like a psychologist to figure out like why you can't focus, right? And then when I was an adult was when I had like I was working, it was in college, and I worked at this internship, and the dentist was like, Davidson, like stop showing up to work drunk and like hungover from like partying too much the night before. Like you need to get your shit together, right? So we all have like three moments that has affected our confidence, and once you have control over those three moments, it won't affect you as much in terms of your landing your dream job. So hopefully this was helpful. Post in the comments below what your takeaways are. This was helpful for me because it helped me be able to realize that the work never stops. Like every year, you're gonna have things that you're gonna play bigger goals, whether it's publishing a book, whether it's getting into, a bigger program, or, being a parent. Like there's always gonna be goals, there's always gonna be obstacles. So hopefully this was helpful. Post if you have any questions, if there's any other topics you want me to cover in our next master class. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this, and hope everyone is well. Cheers.